3 months from now, I'd be sitting in a courtroom watching my brother refuse to look at me. But on that morning, Tuesday, March 12th, I was just standing in my childhood kitchen, holding a piece of paper I wasn't supposed to see. The house smelled like dust and old coffee. Dad's house. Still did, even though he'd been gone for 6 weeks. The quiet felt wrong, like the walls were holding their breath. I remember thinking that grief was supposed to feel loud. Instead, it was suffocating. My sister Claire stood at the counter, pale, her hands shaking. "You need to read this," she said. "Not we. You." I didn't know it then, but that sentence would replay in my head for years. The paper was folded twice. Yellow legal pad. Dad's handwriting, or at least what looked like it at first glance. The title at the top made my stomach drop. Last Will and Testament. "I thought the lawyer already handled this," I said. My voice sounded far away, like it didn't belong to me. Claire swallowed. "This isn't the one he filed." The words hit harder than I expected. There was a will we all knew about. Typed. Witnessed. Clean. Everything split evenly between the three of us. Simple. Predictable. Safe. This wasn't that. I unfolded the paper slowly. My fingers felt numb, like I'd been outside too long in the cold. The ink was dark, pressed hard into the page. Dad always wrote like that. Heavy, deliberate. To my children, it began. I stopped breathing. The next few lines blurred together, but one sentence burned itself into my brain. "I leave the house and all remaining assets to my eldest son. Me." I looked up. Claire's eyes were already wet. Behind her, in the doorway, my brother Mark had gone completely still. "That's not real," Mark said. Too fast. Too loud. "That's not real." "I found it in his desk," Claire whispered. "Behind the false drawer." I remember the sound of the refrigerator humming. The way the clock on the wall ticked, each second landing like a small dar to the chest. I remember thinking how unfair it was that time kept moving when everything else had stopped. Why wouldn't he tell us? I asked. No one answered. I kept reading. Conditions. Notes. A date at the bottom, 3 weeks before Dad died. No witnesses listed. No notary. Just a shaky signature that made my skin crawl. Because the signature didn't look right. Dad's handwriting had always been steady. Even when he was sick. Even when the cancer treatments made his hands tremble, he practiced writing every morning. He was proud of that. This signature looked rushed. Crooked. Like someone trying to imitate confidence they didn't actually have. I felt something shift inside me then. A quiet, sickening suspicion. Mark stepped forward. "You can't seriously think this means anything," he said, staring at me now. "It's probably something he scribbled while he was confused." Confused. That word hung in the air. Dad had been forgetful near the end. Everyone knew that. Some days he forgot what month it was. Some days he called me by his brother's name. And suddenly, the room felt different. Sharper. Dangerous. "If you try to use that," Mark said slowly, "you're stealing from us." I should have said something. Should have defended myself. Instead, I folded the paper back up. "I didn't ask for this," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they didn't matter. Because money doesn't just reveal greed. It reveals memory. Resentment. Old wounds people pretend healed. And standing there, in the kitchen where we grew up, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't about a will. It was about everything we'd never said out loud. And I had a sinking feeling that someone in that room knew exactly how that paper got there. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay on my couch staring at the ceiling, replaying the way Mark's jaw tightened when Claire mentioned the false drawer. The way his eyes flicked to the desk in Dad's study like he was already picturing it. At 2:14 a.m., I finally gave up and checked my phone. 3 unread texts. All from Mark. "We need to talk. This doesn't have to get ugly. Call me." I didn't. By morning, the paper felt heavier in my jacket pocket than it should have. I drove back to Dad's house just after 9. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that makes everything feel unfinished. Claire's car was already there. She met me at the door, whispering like someone might overhear us. Mark came by at 6. What did he want? She hesitated. The will. Of course he did. We went straight to the study. Dad's desk sat against the window, untouched since the funeral. The smell of his aftershave still lingered faintly, cedar and something medicinal. Claire pulled open the bottom drawer and slid her fingers along the back panel. "Here," she said. The false drawer clicked open with a soft, practice sound. Inside was more than just the will. There were envelopes, old bank statements, a folded letter with my name on it, my full name, written in Dad's unmistakable block letters. My chest tightened. "Did you read that?" I asked. She shook her head. I didn't think it was my place. I unfolded the letter. The paper crackled like it hadn't been touched in a long time. "If you're reading this," Dad wrote, "then something has gone wrong." I felt my throat close. He wrote about mistakes, about fear, about not trusting the right people soon enough. The words circled something important without ever landing on it. Then the last line, "Please don't let them turn you against each other." Claire exhaled shakily. "That's ironic." Before I could respond, the front door slammed. Mark's voice echoed down the hallway. "So this is where you're hiding it." He stood in the doorway, eyes fixed on the open drawer. His face looked tired, desperate, and angry in a way I'd never seen before. "You went through his things without us," he said to Claire. "You were the one who changed the locks," she shot back. Silence stretched between us. Mark stepped closer. "You really think Dad suddenly decided to cut us out?" he asked me. "After everything?" "I don't know what to think," I said honestly. "That's convenient." His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then turned it face down quickly. Too quickly. "If this goes to probate," he continued, "they'll question his mental state. You know that, right? They'll drag his illness through court." That word again. Illness. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Why does that sound like a threat?" Claire asked. Mark laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm just being realistic." I noticed his hand was trembling. That was when Claire spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mark, how did you know about the false drawer?" He froze. The room seemed to tilt. Dad told me," he said. Too fast. Years ago, Dad had built that desk himself. Custom. He'd once joked it had one secret too many. He never shared them easily. I watched my brother carefully. The brother who had lived with Dad during the last 6 months. The brother who handled the medications. The brother who drove him to appointments. A memory surfaced, Dad asking me, once, to check his desk, because things keep moving. I hadn't listened. Claire's voice broke. "Mark, did you help him write that?" He stared at the floor. And in that moment, I understood something that made my hands shake. If that will was fake, it wasn't meant to benefit me. It was meant to destroy us. I brought the will home with me that night. I told myself it was for safekeeping, but the truth was simpler. I didn't trust either of them not to make it disappear. It was just after 11:30 p.m. when I laid it out on my kitchen table. One lamp on, curtains closed, the rest of the apartment dark. I felt ridiculous, like someone about to commit a crime instead of read a piece of paper. I studied Dad's handwriting the way you study a stranger's face, looking for something familiar enough to trust. At first, it fooled me. The pressure of the pen, the slant of the letters, even the way he crossed his T's, slightly too far to the right. All things I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. Grocery lists, birthday cards, notes taped to the fridge. But then I noticed the spacing. Dad always left generous margins. He liked things orderly. This will was cramped, words pushed together like the writer was rushing, like they were afraid of running out of time. I pulled out an old notebook from my drawer. Inside were pages of Dad's writing from years ago, recipes he'd insisted on writing down, even though he never followed them. I laid the pages side by side. That's when my stomach dropped. The capital letters didn't match. Dad's capital M had always been sharp, almost angular. In the will, it was rounded, softer. And his signature, God, the signature. It leaned forward, like it was chasing something. Dad's never did that. His signature was steady, grounded. Even at the end, I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. Someone had practiced this. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Have you decided what you're going to do?" No name, no context, but I knew exactly who it was. I didn't respond. Instead, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. 2 months before Dad died, he called me late one night. He sounded confused, upset. "Someone's been signing my name," he'd said. I'd laughed it off. Told him stress could do strange things. Told him to get some rest. I hated myself for that now. At exactly 12:07 a.m., I opened my laptop and searched for a handwriting analyst. I didn't even know what I was looking for, validation, maybe, or permission to believe what my gut already knew. I emailed scanned copies of the will and some of Dad's old writing. My hands shook the entire time. Then my phone rang. Mark. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call. Then a text. You don't want to do this. Think about Claire. Think about Dad. That last one felt like a punch. I played the voicemail. His voice was low, controlled. I'm trying to protect this family, he said. If you take that paper to a lawyer, everything gets ugly. Dad wouldn't have wanted that. Dad wouldn't have wanted lies either. I didn't sleep again. Just sat there until dawn, watching the light creep across the table where the will lay exposed, flawed, fragile. At 9:42 a.m., my email chimed. One message. Preliminary review suggests the signature is inconsistent with known samples. I need to examine originals to be certain. Inconsistent. I closed my eyes. That afternoon, Claire called me crying. Mark's telling people you manipulated Dad, she said. That you pressured him when he was sick. The air felt too thin to breathe. That was when it became clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding spiraling out of control. This was a strategy. And whatever Mark had done, he wasn't planning to back down. Because liars don't panic when they're innocent. They panic when the truth is about to catch them. The lawyer's office was colder than I expected. Not temperature-wise, emotionally. Beige walls. Frosted glass. A clock that ticked too loud for a room where people came to talk about death. I sat across from him with the will between us, my palms damp, my pulse loud in my ears. Mr. Halvorsen had been Dad's attorney for over 20 years. He'd handled everything from property disputes to that first, clean, typed will. If anyone knew what Dad would have wanted, it was him. He adjusted his glasses and began reading. At first, he didn't say anything. Just nodded slowly, eyes moving line by line. The silence stretched. I watched his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Then he stopped. Completely. He looked up at me, then back down at the page. Read the signature again. His lips pressed into a thin line. I've never seen this document before, he said finally. My stomach dropped. Could it still be valid? He leaned back in his chair. Handwritten wills can be valid under certain circumstances, he said carefully. But this raises concerns. That word again. He pointed to the date. Your father was hospitalized that week. Do you know that? Yes, I said. He wasn't lucid every day. Mr. Halvorsen nodded. Capacity is key. And intent. Both would be heavily questioned here. He hesitated, then added, There's something else. My heart started racing. What? This handwriting, he said, tapping the page. It's close, but not close enough. The room seemed to tilt. Before I could respond, the door opened. Mark walked in. I shot to my feet. What are you doing here? He smiled like this was a coincidence. I had an appointment, he said, looking at the lawyer. About Dad's estate. Mr. Halvorsen frowned. I wasn't aware. You are now, Mark interrupted smoothly. The air turned thick. Mark glanced at the will on the desk. So, he said, you finally brought it in. You followed me? I asked. He shrugged. I guessed. Mr. Halvorsen cleared his throat. This document presents significant legal challenges, he said. If submitted, it would likely lead to probate litigation. That's exactly why we shouldn't, Mark said quickly. Dad hated conflict. I stared at him. You didn't seem worried about conflict when you started telling people I manipulated him. Mark's smile slipped. That's not what I said, he replied. Mr. Halvorsen stood. I think this conversation needs to pause, he said firmly. I won't represent multiple parties with competing interests. Mark leaned forward. Then advise him, he said, nodding at me. Tell him this is a mistake. The lawyer didn't hesitate. My advice, he said slowly, is to preserve the document and seek an independent forensic analysis. Mark's face went pale. For the first time, I saw fear flicker across it, raw and unguarded. No, Mark said. That's unnecessary. That's not your decision, the lawyer replied. Silence slammed down between us. Mark turned to me. If you do this, he said quietly, you lose everything. Your family, your reputation, maybe more. I felt something harden inside my chest. I think, I said, that already happened. I left with the will sealed in an evidence sleeve. Outside, my phone buzzed again. A message from Claire. He's blaming you for everything. He says Dad was scared of you. I stopped walking. Because that lie wasn't just cruel. It was calculated. And as I stood there on the sidewalk, clutching proof that could tear us apart, one thought echoed louder than the rest. If Mark was willing to rewrite Dad's final words, what else had he rewritten along the way? I didn't notice the crossed out line at first. It was already evening when I spread everything across my dining table again. Copies of the will, Dad's old notebooks, bank statements Claire had slipped me in a manila folder. The sky outside my window was bruised purple, rain tapping softly against the glass. I was exhausted, emotionally hollowed out. That's probably why I almost missed it. Halfway down the handwritten will, just below the paragraph leaving everything to me, there was a faint indentation. Not ink. Pressure. As if someone had written something, then erased it hard enough to scar the paper. I held the page up to the lamp. There it was. A single line, scratched out so aggressively the paper thinned in places. I could just make out the words beneath. To be divided equally among my children. My chest tightened. That line had come first. The ink above it, leaving everything to me, was darker, heavier. Written later. I felt dizzy. Sat down hard in the chair. Someone hadn't just written a new will. They'd edited one. My phone rang. Claire, I found something, I said before she could speak. So did I, she replied. Her voice was tight. Dad's bank records. There were withdrawals. Large ones. In cash. During the last 2 months. I closed my eyes. Mark. A pause. I didn't want to say it. Neither did I. I told her about the crossed out line. There was silence on the other end of the call, then a sharp inhale. He changed it, she whispered. No, I corrected. Someone else did. That night, I dreamed of Dad sitting at the kitchen table, trying to speak while someone else guided his hand. I woke up at 3:38 a.m., heart racing, sheets twisted around my legs. By morning, Mark had escalated. I found out through a mutual friend. He'd contacted a doctor Dad saw once, claiming there were records proving cognitive decline. He was building a case. Not just against the will. Against me. I drove to Claire's. She looked smaller somehow, like the walls of the house were pressing in on her. He wants us to turn on each other, she said. And it's working, I replied. We decided to confront him together. Mark answered the door with a forced smile. This feels dramatic, he said, stepping aside. I placed the will on the table. Opened it to the crossed out line. Explain this. He stared at it. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, Dad changed his mind. You expect us to believe he crossed out equal division and rewrote it, leaving everything to me? I asked. Mark looked at Claire. You were always his favorite. That hurt more than I expected. Did you tell him what would happen if he didn't? Claire asked suddenly. Mark's jaw tightened. You have no idea what those last weeks were like. I know he was afraid, I said. He told me. Mark's eyes flicked up. Just for a second. Too fast. Afraid. Not of death. Of something else. You pressured him, Claire said. Her voice shook, but she didn't back down. You isolated him. Mark laughed. It came out sharp. I took care of him. You controlled him, I said. That was when he snapped. You think you're better than me? He shouted. You left. I stayed. I did the ugly parts. The room fell silent. Because underneath the anger was something else. Guilt. And desperation. As we left, Mark called after us, his voice suddenly calm. If this goes public, he said, no one wins. He was wrong. Someone already had. And it wasn't any of us. Because the moment that line was crossed out, our family stopped being 3 siblings. It became 3 suspects. By the time part 6 began, I had stopped thinking of Mark as my brother. That realization hurt more than anything else. It was Thursday morning when Claire sent me a screenshot that made my stomach drop. An email. From Mark. Sent to a distant cousin I barely spoke to anymore. We're worried about him, it read. The stress after Dad's death has been intense. There are signs he's not thinking clearly. Me. He was laying groundwork. Quietly. Carefully. I called her immediately. He's trying to discredit me. I know, she said. He called Aunt Rebecca too. Told her you've been unstable since college. I laughed, sharp and humorless. That was 20 years ago. That's how lies work, Claire said. They borrow old truths. Later that day, I went back to Dad's house alone. I told myself I was just checking on paperwork. The real reason was simpler. I needed to understand what Mark had been hiding. The house felt wrong without anyone else there. Every step echoed. The air smelled stale, like grief that had settled into the walls. I went straight to Mark's old room. He'd moved back in during Dad's illness. The closet was half empty. but the desk drawer was locked. Dad never locked drawers. I didn't force it. Instead, I checked the garage. That's where Dad kept the tools, including a small lockbox cutter I remembered from years ago. It took less than a minute. Inside the drawer was a phone. Not Dad's. Mark's second phone. My hands shook as I turned it on. No passcode. The messages loaded instantly. Dozens of texts. Dates lining up perfectly with the weeks Dad declined. Conversations with a number saved only as Dr. P. He's refusing again. Try later when he's calmer. He's confused. Use that. My vision blurred. I scrolled. We need his signature. I can guide his hand if I have to. I felt sick. This wasn't just manipulation. This was coordination. Footsteps sounded behind me. I spun around. Mark stood in the doorway. For a split second, neither of us moved. Then his eyes dropped to the phone in my hand. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. You drugged him, I whispered. His face hardened. I medicated him. As prescribed. These messages are out of context. I stepped back. You forged his will. He laughed, bitter. You think I wanted it to be you? That paper was insurance. Against what? He didn't answer. Instead, he took a step forward. You have no idea how close we came to losing everything. I demanded. That's when his phone buzzed in my hand. A new message from Dr. P. If they see this, we're done. Mark lunged. I barely reacted in time, shoving the desk between us. The phone slipped from my grip, skidding across the floor. Claire's voice echoed from outside. What's going on? Mark froze. Because he hadn't expected her. Neither had I. In that moment, standing in our father's house, surrounded by evidence and lies, I finally understood the truth. Mark hadn't been trying to take everything for himself. He'd been trying to cover something much worse. And whatever it was, it terrified him enough to rewrite our father's last words. The shouting started before Claire even reached the doorway. What did you do? She demanded, eyes locked on Mark. Then she saw the phone on the floor. The second phone. Her face drained of color. What is that? Mark looked between us like a trapped animal. Leave, he said to her. This doesn't concern you. It concerns all of us, she shot back. Dad, the will, the money, and whatever the hell you're hiding. I picked up the phone again, my hand steadier now. Anger had replaced shock. You want to explain these messages, Mark? About guiding his hand. Silence. Then Mark did something I didn't expect. He laughed. Not loud. Not hysterical. Just a short, broken sound. You think this is about greed, he said. That's the saddest part. Claire stepped closer. Then tell us what it's about. He looked at her for a long moment. Really looked. And for the first time since Dad got sick, his voice cracked. He was going to ruin everything. The room went dead quiet. Dad, I asked. No, Mark snapped. Me. He sank into one of the dining chairs, elbows on his knees, hands shaking. I made a mistake. Years ago. Financial. Bad one. I thought I'd fixed it. My pulse quickened. What kind of mistake? The kind that comes back with interest, he muttered. Claire crossed her arms. So you drugged Dad? Manipulated him? For money. For time, Mark said. I needed time. I felt cold all over. The withdrawals, I said slowly. That wasn't spending. That was paying someone off. Mark didn't deny it. They were threatening legal action, he continued. Criminal charges. Dad found out. He wanted to go to the authorities. Claire's voice trembled. So you scared him. I protected him, Mark snapped. He was sick. He didn't understand what that would do to this family. You forged his will, I said. You erased his choices. Mark stood suddenly. Because if everything stayed equal, probate would have frozen the estate. Investigations. Audits. I needed control. Just long enough to fix it. The words echoed in my head. Control. Everything made sense now. That's why you made it look like Dad favored me, I said. You wanted us fighting each other instead of you. Mark's eyes flicked away. Claire shook her head, tears spilling over. You destroyed us. Before anyone could say another word, the front door slammed open. A woman I didn't recognize stood there. Late 40s. Sharp suit. Eyes that took everything in too quickly. Mark, she said. We need to talk. His face went white. You said this was handled, he whispered. She glanced at us. Then back at him. Clearly, it's not. Claire grabbed my arm. Who is that? The woman smiled thinly. I'm his attorney. The air left my lungs. She continued, calm and professional. And if any of you plan to take what you found to the authorities, I suggest you understand the consequences first. What consequences? I asked. Her gaze lingered on me. Your father's accounts weren't as clean as you think. Mark stared at the floor. The lawyer stepped back toward the door. Call me, she told him. Now. She left as abruptly as she'd arrived. Claire started crying openly. I just stood there, numb. Because the story had changed again. Dad hadn't just been a victim. He'd been a liability. And whatever Mark was involved in, it was big enough that professionals were already circling. As I looked at my brother, my former brother, I realized something chilling. The will hadn't destroyed us on its own. It had been the fuse. And the explosion was just beginning. It was in the wall. I only found it because I couldn't stop thinking about what the lawyer had said. Your father's accounts weren't as clean as you think. That sentence gnawed at me all night. Dad had been careful to the point of obsession. If something was hidden, it was hidden deliberately. The next morning, I returned to the house alone. Claire was too shaken. Mark had stopped answering calls. I started in the study again, scanning the room the way Dad used to when he misplaced something, slow, methodical. That's when I noticed the outlet near the bookshelf was loose. Not broken. Removed and replaced too many times. Dad hated unfinished work. I unscrewed the plate. Behind it was a folded sheet of paper, sealed in plastic. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a ledger page. Handwritten. Dates. Amounts. Names I didn't recognize. And at the top, in Dad's writing. If this is found, it means Mark didn't stop. My chest tightened painfully. The page detailed transfers between accounts, small at first, then larger. Dad had flagged them, questioned them, confronted Mark. There were notes in the margins, written shakily, like he'd been afraid of running out of time. He says it's temporary. He says it's legal. I don't believe him. At the bottom was a final sentence that made my knees buckle. If anything happens to me, this is not an accident. I sank to the floor. Dad had known. Not just about the money. About the danger. My phone buzzed. Claire, I found something. I said, my voice barely working. So did I, she replied. Mark emptied the joint account last night. The pieces slammed together. He's running, she whispered. No, I said slowly. He's panicking. I sent photos of the page to a secure cloud folder, then to Claire. I hesitated before doing anything else. Because once this went beyond us, there was no undoing it. That hesitation almost cost me everything. The sound of a car in the driveway snapped me to my feet. Mark. I barely had time to shove the page back into my jacket before the front door opened. He looked wrecked. Hair uncombed. Eyes bloodshot. You shouldn't be here, he said. I found it, I replied. He froze. Found what? The page, I said. Dad hid it. He knew. For a moment, something like relief crossed his face. Then fear. You don't understand, he said. If you show that to anyone, they already know, I lied. He took a step toward me. Listen to me. This doesn't end with an arrest. It ends with all of us ruined. I held my ground. Dad was scared of you. No, Mark snapped. He was scared for me. Silence stretched between us. Then Mark said something that made my blood run cold. They won't let me walk away. Who? I asked. Before he could answer, his phone rang. Unknown number. He looked at it. Then at me. See, he whispered. They're watching. He answered. Yes, he said. I'm handling it. He ended the call and backed toward the door. If you care about Claire, he said, you'll stay quiet. The door slammed behind him. I stood there shaking, clutching proof that could expose everything, or get someone hurt. Because now I knew the truth. The hidden page wasn't just evidence. It was a warning. And Dad had written it for the one child he thought might survive what came next. By the time Part 9 began, the will didn't matter anymore. Money had stopped being the weapon. Truth had taken its place. Claire and I met that night at her house. Every light on, curtains drawn tight. She'd locked her phone in a drawer after finding a tracking app installed without her knowledge. Mark had thought of everything. Or almost everything. I showed her the hidden page. She read it twice. Then a third time. Her hands were shaking so badly, I had to take the paper from her before it tore. He knew, she whispered. Dad knew Mark was in trouble. Real trouble. And he knew Mark wouldn't stop, I said. We sat there in silence, the weight of it pressing down on us. The house creaked. A dog barked somewhere outside. Normal sounds that felt surreal now. I don't care about the inheritance anymore, Claire said finally. I just want this to end. So do I replied. But it won't if we keep pretending this is a family issue. Her eyes met mine. You want to go to the police? I want to go to the truth, I said. The police may be part of that. We didn't decide right away. Fear has a way of slowing everything down. We listed risks like accountants tallying losses, retaliation, public exposure, Dad's reputation dragged through headlines. But every path that avoided action ended the same way, with Mark in control. At 6:22 a.m., my phone buzzed. A notification from the cloud folder. Someone had tried to open the ledger page. Mark. He knows we have it, Claire said, reading over my shoulder. Seconds later, my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. I answered. This has gone far enough, he said, voice hoarse. I can fix this. You had your chance, I replied. You think giving that to the authorities protects you? He snapped. You think they won't tear Dad apart to save themselves? That word again. Themselves. Who are they? Claire shouted in the background. Mark hesitated. That hesitation was everything. You already know, he said quietly. You just don't want to say it. Then the line went dead. An hour later, we were sitting in a small conference room downtown, not a police station. A regulatory office. Financial crimes. We'd chosen carefully. The ledger page sat on the table between us like a loaded gun. The investigator didn't interrupt as we spoke. Didn't rush us. Just listened. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair. Your father did the right thing, he said. And so are you. I felt something crack open in my chest. Outside, the city moved on. People drank coffee, laughed, made plans. They had no idea a family was collapsing quietly inside a government building. That afternoon, Mark was detained. Not arrested. Not yet. But questioned. Claire cried when she heard. Not from relief. From grief. Even now, she said, part of me wants to believe him. I know, I said. That night, the lawyer, the sharp one, called me. You've complicated things, she said coolly. No, I replied. I've clarified them. She paused. You should prepare yourself. This won't end cleanly. I hung up shaking. Because for the first time since Dad died, I wasn't afraid of what would happen to me. I was afraid of what would happen to Mark. Because when lies unravel, they don't just expose the guilty. They expose everyone who helped keep them alive. And the inheritance, the thing we'd once fought over, was about to do what it always does best. Reveal exactly who we were willing to sacrifice.